The Nevada desert had seen its share of storms over the decades, but few as fierce as the one gathering strength that October morning. Dark clouds rolled in from the west like an invading army, their bellies swollen with rain that would soon unleash fury upon the parched landscape below. For the men and women of Nellis Air Force Base, this was more than just unusual weather. It was the backdrop to a crisis that would test the limits of courage, skill, and the mysterious bond between pilot and machine. In Hangar 3, a Black Hawk helicopter sat silent and uncooperative, its systems refusing to respond despite hours of expert attention. And somewhere in the depths of the Grand Canyon, 26 souls waited for salvation that seemed increasingly impossible to deliver. At the center of the main hangar stood the imposing silhouette of a UH-60M Black Hawk helicopter, its matte black frame reflecting the overhead lights in dull patches. The aircraft represented more than just military hardware. It was a lifeline, the only hope for a group of stranded veterans and children caught in a flash flood situation developing rapidly in the Grand Canyon. Chief Master Sergeant Frank Henderson moved with practiced precision around the helicopter, his weathered hands checking connections with methodical care. At 58, his salt and pepper hair spoke of decades spent maintaining military aircraft, from the F-4 Phantoms of his early career to the advanced machines of today. 35 years of service had earned him respect across the base, along with a stubborn adherence to procedure that younger technicians sometimes found frustrating. "Circuit check complete, no response from the startup sequence," Henderson announced, his voice carrying the weight of growing concern. "Running the diagnostic again." Around him, 5 technicians worked with increasing urgency, their faces showing the strain of a mission rapidly approaching failure. They had been at it for nearly 2 hours, and the Black Hawk remained stubbornly silent. Sergeant David Crawford, known universally as Bull, for his formidable build and equally imposing personality, slammed a diagnostic tablet onto a nearby workbench. "3 complete system checks, nothing. It's like the damn thing's possessed." Lieutenant Jennifer Parker, the youngest member of the team at 28, studied her own readings with growing frustration. Her MIT education and natural aptitude with electronic systems had earned her a position on the elite maintenance crew, but her youth and gender often meant her insights were the last to be considered. "The integrated systems are showing green individually, but something's preventing proper communication between the avionics and engine control," she offered. "I think—" "We've checked that twice already," Crawford interrupted, not even turning to acknowledge her. "The problem is mechanical, not electronic." Parker fell silent, her jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. From the observation deck above the hangar floor, Colonel Thomas Mitchell watched the scene unfold with mounting concern. At 62, the base commander had seen his share of crises, but this one carried particular weight. His weathered face, permanently tanned from decades in cockpits, revealed nothing of his inner turmoil as he monitored both the storm's approach on radar and the stalled rescue operation below. The radio at his side crackled to life. "Command, this is Canyon Outpost. Water level has risen another 8 inches in the last 30 minutes. We've moved everyone to higher ground, but the access road is completely submerged. 26 souls waiting evacuation, including 12 children and 2 with minor injuries. Weather deteriorating rapidly. How copy?" Mitchell pressed the transmit button. "Solid copy, Canyon. Hang tight. Working on our extraction plan. We'll advise soonest." He lowered the radio and turned to Captain Robert Anderson, the Black Hawk pilot standing tensely beside him. At 40, Anderson had thousands of flight hours and dozens of rescue operations under his belt, but even his experienced features showed strain. "Sir, every minute counts here. That canyon can fill with 20 feet of water in under an hour when the storms hit upstream," Anderson said quietly. "Those kids from the Veterans Teaching Courage program, they're sitting ducks." Mitchell's mind raced through alternatives. The base had 2 other helicopters, but one was disassembled for major maintenance, and the other was deployed on a border mission. No other nearby bases had aircraft that could reach the location in time. The trapped group included the son of Senator Williams and, most personally painful, his own goddaughter Katie. "What about bringing in another unit from Creech?" Anderson suggested, referring to the Air Force Base north of Las Vegas. "Already checked. Their SAR birds are deployed on a training exercise over the Pacific. They can't get back in time." Mitchell's eyes remained fixed on the motionless Black Hawk below. This helicopter is their only hope. Anderson followed his gaze. Then we need to get it flying, sir. Below them, Henderson emerged from the cockpit, shaking his head at another failed startup attempt. The look on his face told Mitchell everything he needed to know. Making his decision, Mitchell reached for his secure phone and punched in a 4-digit extension. When the line connected, his voice took on a tone rarely heard by his subordinates, one of urgency tinged with personal concern. Major Sullivan, Tom Mitchell, I need you in Hangar 3 immediately. We have a situation. The call complete, Mitchell turned back to the observation window. His mind drifted to another time, another crisis, and another exceptional pilot who had pulled off the impossible. 30 years earlier, then, Captain Mitchell had found himself in the backwoods of Vietnam alongside his squadron mate and closest friend, Captain Daniel Sullivan. Their F-4 Phantom had taken heavy damage from anti-aircraft fire, forcing them to eject over hostile territory. With Mitchell nursing a broken leg, Daniel had somehow managed to repair a downed helicopter abandoned by South Vietnamese forces, getting them both to safety against impossible odds. "The helicopter talks to you," Daniel had explained later when pressed about how he'd managed to fix the unfamiliar craft. "You just have to know how to listen." Daniel Sullivan had gone on to become one of the most decorated pilots in the Air Force, before a routine training flight in an experimental aircraft had claimed his life 15 years ago. But his daughter, his legacy, had proven every bit as exceptional. A memory surfaced of a 12-year-old Major Maggie Sullivan, sitting in her father's lap in the cockpit of a training aircraft, her small hands gripping the controls as Daniel guided her through the fundamentals of flight with patient instruction. Mitchell had watched from the sidelines, amazed at the child's natural affinity for aviation, her questions reflecting an intuitive grasp that went beyond mere technical understanding. Now that same girl was a decorated combat pilot, with skills that might be their only hope. The hangar doors slid open, and all eyes turned to the slim figure that strode purposefully into the cavernous space. Major Maggie Sullivan moved with a confident economy of motion that immediately commanded attention. At 35, she carried herself with the poised assurance that came from mastering one of the world's most demanding professions. Her flight suit bore the patches of her FA-18 Super Hornet squadron, and her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun that accentuated high cheekbones and alert green eyes. Her father's eyes, Mitchell thought with a pang of recognition. Despite her medium height, she seemed to fill the space around her through sheer force of presence. "What's the situation, Chief?" she asked Henderson directly, bypassing formalities. Henderson straightened, his expression reflecting a mixture of respect and skepticism. "Major Sullivan, we have a Black Hawk that won't start. Complete electrical and avionics failure during pre-flight. We've run full diagnostics 3 times with no conclusive results." Maggie nodded, taking in the information while her eyes scanned the helicopter with professional assessment. "And the urgency?" "Flash flood in the Grand Canyon," Captain Anderson interjected, descending from the observation deck with Colonel Mitchell. "We have 26 civilians stranded, including children. The water's rising fast, and this bird is their only ride out." Something flickered in Maggie's expression, a momentary crack in her professional mask, before she regained her composure. "Katie's with them," Mitchell said quietly as he approached, confirming what she had already suspected. Katie Bennett, Mitchell's goddaughter, and Maggie's own goddaughter as well. The daughter of her academy roommate who had died in Afghanistan 5 years ago. Maggie's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "What have you tried so far?" "Everything by the book," Henderson replied. "Full electronic diagnostic, manual checks of all primary and secondary systems, component isolation testing. We've verified power to all buses, checked all circuit breakers, and confirmed fuel flow to both engines. She should start, but she won't." Maggie listened, her focus now entirely on the technical challenge at hand. "Mind if I take a look?" Henderson gestured toward the helicopter with a sweep of his arm, his expression suggesting limited expectations, but professional courtesy. "Be my guest, Major." As Maggie approached the Black Hawk, Lieutenant Parker stepped forward eagerly. "Major Sullivan, I've been monitoring the electronic interfaces between systems. There might be—" "Later, Lieutenant," Crawford cut in. "Let the Major..." Maggie paused, turning to Parker with an appraising look. "Actually, I'd like to hear it. What have you found?" Parker straightened, surprised at being acknowledged. The individual systems are testing normal in isolation, but I'm seeing anomalies in the integration pathways. It's like the components aren't speaking the same language. Interesting, Maggie nodded, filing away the information. Stay close. The small interaction didn't go unnoticed by the rest of the team. Crawford's frown deepened, while Henderson watched with guarded curiosity. Maggie circled the helicopter slowly, her eyes taking in details that others might miss. Unlike the technicians who had immediately buried themselves in diagnostic screens and manuals, she seemed to be absorbing the aircraft as a whole entity. Her hand occasionally reached out to touch the fuselage, feeling for vibrations or abnormalities in a manner that seemed almost intuitive. "When was the last successful flight?" she asked, continuing her inspection. 3 days ago, Anderson answered. Standard patrol mission, no issues reported. And it was serviced since then? Routine maintenance yesterday, Henderson confirmed. Everything checked out. Maggie nodded, processing the information as she completed her circuit around the aircraft. Without warning, she pulled herself up into the cockpit and settled into the pilot's seat, her hands hovering over the controls without touching them, as if sensing the aircraft's energy. Mitchell watched from below, memories overlapping with present reality. Her father had approached aircraft the same way, not as machines to be manipulated, but as partners to be understood. Inside the cockpit, Maggie took a deep breath, letting her senses attune to the subtle details around her. The faint smell of hydraulic fluid, the slight give of the seat beneath her, the way the overhead panel cast shadows across the instrument displays. While others saw a collection of systems and subsystems, she perceived the Black Hawk as an integrated whole, a philosophy instilled by her father long before she understood its significance. "A machine has a pulse," he had told her during one of their many hangar sessions. "Not like yours or mine, but a rhythm all the same. Learn to feel it, and you'll know when something's wrong before any computer can tell you." She ran her hands lightly over the control panel, then reached up to the overhead switches, noting their positions. Something felt off, not in any way that would appear on a diagnostic screen, but in the subtle interplay of systems that experienced pilots come to recognize instinctively. Outside, the storm clouds had darkened further, and the first heavy raindrops began to strike the hangar roof with metallic pings. The clock was ticking. Maggie emerged from the cockpit, her expression thoughtful. "I'd like to try something unconventional." "We've tried everything in the manual," Henderson reminded her, skepticism evident in his tone. "That's precisely the point, Chief," she replied. "When the manual fails, sometimes you need to go beyond it." The statement hung in the air, polarizing the group instantly. Crawford's expression hardened with disapproval, while Parker leaned forward with interest. Anderson and Mitchell exchanged glances, the latter's eyes showing a glimmer of hope. "What do you have in mind?" Mitchell asked. "I need to see the maintenance records for the past month, not just yesterday's service," Maggie began. "And I want to power down completely, then restore systems in a specific sequence, rather than the standard boot procedure." "That's not protocol," Henderson objected. "There's a reason we have standardized procedures." "With all due respect, Chief, those procedures haven't worked," Maggie countered calmly. "Sometimes systems develop unique personalities after years of service. This isn't about ignoring protocol. It's about understanding that every aircraft eventually develops quirks that don't appear in any manual." The philosophy was pure Daniel Sullivan, and Mitchell knew it. He stepped forward before Henderson could object further. "Do it," he ordered. "Chief, get the Major everything she needs." The authority in his voice left no room for debate. Henderson nodded stiffly and motioned to one of his technicians to retrieve the requested records. As the team reorganized around Maggie's approach, the hangar doors opened again, admitting a gust of wind and rain along with a harried-looking communications officer. "Colonel," the young lieutenant called out. "Updated report from Canyon Outpost. The water level has risen another foot. They've had to move to a higher ledge, and the weather radar shows the cell intensifying. Their satellite phone is also showing low battery." Mitchell absorbed this news with a grim expression. "Understood. Keep the channel open." The stakes had just risen considerably. He turned back to find Maggie already immersed in the maintenance logs, her finger tracing entries with focused intensity. "There," she said suddenly, tapping a notation from 2 weeks prior. "Minor avionics update performed on the 15th. Was that a standard software patch?" Parker moved closer to examine the entry. "Yes, it was the quarterly update package. All our Blackhawks received it." "And have all of them flown since?" Yes, Henderson confirmed after checking his records. This is the only one showing issues. Maggie nodded, her mind connecting dots that others couldn't see. I think I know what's happening. The update affected the integration between the fuel management system and the engine control module. It's created a fault condition that only appears under specific circumstances. That doesn't explain why it flew fine 3 days ago, Crawford objected. Actually, it might, Maggie countered. Temperature fluctuations, humidity changes, barometric pressure, any of these could trigger the fault condition if the systems are operating at the edge of their tolerance parameters. She turned to Parker. Lieutenant, what's the air pressure today compared to 3 days ago? Parker quickly checked the environmental logs. Significant drop, 29.74 inches today versus 30.12 then. We're at the leading edge of this low-pressure system. That's it, Maggie said with quiet confidence. The pressure differential has pushed the system over the edge. The engines and control systems are miscommunicating. Henderson looked skeptical but intrigued. If that's true, how do we fix it? We need to perform a complete power down, then bring the systems back online in a specific sequence that allows them to establish proper handshakes, Maggie explained. But first, I need to make a small adjustment to the fuel control parameters. The technical discussion continued, with Maggie outlining her approach while the storm intensified outside. Crawford remained dubious, but Parker began to understand the logic behind Maggie's unconventional strategy. Her own expertise in electronic systems, allowing her to grasp the nuanced approach. It's worth trying, Parker supported, earning a sharp look from Crawford. We don't have time for experimentation, he growled. There are lives at stake. Which is precisely why we need to think beyond standard procedures, Maggie replied calmly. When the usual methods fail, clinging to them won't save anyone. Colonel Mitchell, who had been listening intently, made his decision. Proceed, Major. You have 20 minutes. The authorization galvanized the team into action. Under Maggie's direction, they began the process of completely powering down the Blackhawk, removing specific circuit breakers to ensure total system reset. As they worked, Parker stayed close to Maggie, their collaborative rhythm developing naturally. You understand electronic systems well, Maggie noted as they accessed a rarely used maintenance panel beneath the helicopter. MIT electrical engineering before the Air Force, Parker replied, but most of the team prefers mechanical solutions. Sometimes the answer lies in between, Maggie said, her focus unwavering. My father used to say that aircraft aren't just machines. They're conversations between mechanical components and electronic signals. When the conversation breaks down, you need to help them find a common language again. Parker absorbed this perspective with evident appreciation. Your father sounds like he was an amazing pilot. He was, Maggie confirmed, her voice softening slightly before returning to its professional cadence. Now, let's get this bird talking again. The team worked methodically through Maggie's procedure, bypassing certain safety interlocks with Mitchell's authorization to implement her unconventional approach. Crawford watched with arms crossed, his skepticism palpable, while Henderson supervised with professional attention to detail despite his reservations. Outside, the storm had fully arrived. Rain pounded against the hangar roof in sheets, and occasional flashes of lightning illuminated the darkened sky. The radio continued to deliver increasingly urgent updates from Canyon Outpost, where rising waters had forced the stranded group to their final refuge point. As Maggie made the final adjustments, her hands moved with the confidence of someone who understood aircraft at an almost spiritual level. This wasn't just technical knowledge. It was intuition honed by thousands of flight hours and a lifetime immersed in aviation. Ready for power-up sequence, she announced, sliding into the pilot's seat. Lieutenant Parker, I need you monitoring the integration parameters from the external diagnostic port. Alert me to any anomalies in the handshake protocols. Yes, Major, Parker responded, positioning herself with the diagnostic equipment. The tension in the hangar was palpable as Maggie began the carefully choreographed power-up sequence. Instead of following the standard procedure, she brought systems online in a pattern that allowed each component to establish proper communication before the next was activated. The initial indicators remained dark, then slowly began to illuminate in sequence. Parker called out readings from her position, her voice steady despite the pressure. Avionics bus online, communication protocols initializing, integration parameters, holding steady. In the cockpit, Maggie watched the displays with focused intensity, making micro-adjustments to timing based on the aircraft's responses. This wasn't just a technical procedure, it was a conversation with the Black Hawk, coaxing it back to life through understanding rather than force. Fuel management system online, Parker continued. Handshake with engine control module. Established. Parameters normalizing. A collective breath was held as Maggie reached for the engine start switches. The moment of truth had arrived. Initiating engine start sequence, she announced, her voice calm despite the stakes. The familiar whine of the turbine engines attempting to catch filled the hangar, building in pitch and intensity. For a heart-stopping moment, the sound wavered, threatening to die out as it had during previous attempts. Maggie made a subtle adjustment, her hands moving with intuitive precision. "Come on," she whispered. "Talk to me." As if responding to her encouragement, the engine note suddenly strengthened, rising to a healthy roar as the turbine spooled up successfully. The diagnostic panels blazed with green indicators, and the Black Hawk trembled with awakened power. "Engine 1 stable and running! Engine 2 coming online! Stable!" Parker called out, her voice now charged with excitement. "All systems green!" A cheer erupted from the assembled technicians. Even Crawford's stoic expression cracked slightly at the success. Henderson nodded with grudging respect, approaching the helicopter as Maggie emerged from the cockpit. "I don't know how you did it, Major, but it's running smooth as silk now," he acknowledged. "The airframe was telling us what it needed," Maggie replied simply. "We just had to listen correctly." Colonel Mitchell stepped forward, the relief on his face tempered by the urgency of their situation. "Outstanding work, Major Sullivan. Captain Anderson, how quickly can you get airborne?" Anderson was already moving toward the helicopter, performing a rapid external check. 10 minutes for final preparations and weather briefing." "Make it 5, Mitchell ordered. "Those people don't have much time." As the preparations accelerated, Maggie stood back, her part apparently complete. The mission would now transfer to Anderson and his crew, the rescue specialists trained for exactly this type of operation. A sudden commotion from the communications station drew everyone's attention. "Sir!" the communications officer called out. "Canyon Outpost reports the ledge is beginning to erode under the water pressure. They estimate less than 30 minutes before it becomes unstable. And sir, the winds at the canyon are gusting to 50 knots with severe turbulence reported." Mitchell turned to Anderson, whose expression had grown grave. "Can you handle those conditions?" The pilot hesitated, only briefly, but long enough to be noticed. "It's right at the operational limits, sir. In those winds with that terrain, the margin for error is practically non-existent." Before Mitchell could respond, Maggie stepped forward. "Sir, I should fly this mission." The statement drew surprised looks from everyone present. "Major, with all due respect, you're an F-18 pilot," Anderson objected. "This is a complex rescue operation in a helicopter." "I'm also fully qualified on the UH-60, Maggie countered calmly. "I maintain dual certification after transitioning to fighters." Mitchell's eyebrows rose slightly. "I wasn't aware of that." "It wasn't relevant until now," she replied. "My father insisted I learn helicopters before jets, said it would make me a better pilot." Her eyes met Mitchell's directly. "More importantly, I know exactly how this particular aircraft is functioning after the restart. I can feel its tolerances." Anderson looked conflicted, professional pride warring with practical considerations. "The conditions out there are extreme." "I'm aware," Maggie said, "but I've flown worse." A tense silence fell as Mitchell weighed the decision. The lives of 26 people, including his goddaughter, hung in the balance. "How current are you on the Black Hawk?" he asked finally. "I logged 20 hours last month during a joint operations exercise at Edwards," she answered without hesitation. "Night operations mountain terrain." The revelation surprised everyone. Most fighter pilots wouldn't voluntarily maintain proficiency in an entirely different aircraft category without specific requirements to do so. Mitchell made his decision. "Major Sullivan will pilot. Captain Anderson, you'll act as co-pilot." Anderson nodded, professional enough to accept the decision despite his evident reservations. "We'll need a crew chief and a medic," Maggie said, already shifting into mission planning. "Sergeant Harris is prepped and ready as crew chief," Henderson supplied, "and Lieutenant Martinez is standing by as medic." Maggie nodded, turning to Parker with unexpected consideration. "Lieutenant Parker, I want you on this flight too." Parker blinked in surprise. "Sir?" "If we encounter any more system anomalies, your expertise could be crucial," Maggie explained. "Consider it field testing your diagnostic skills." The young lieutenant straightened, determined not to show how much the opportunity meant. "Yes, Major. As the expanded crew prepared for departure, Mitchell pulled Maggie aside, his voice low and personal. "Are you certain about this, Maggie? Those are dangerous conditions even for a dedicated rescue pilot." Her expression softened momentarily. "Katie is out there, Tom, so are 25 other people. And yes, I'm certain. This feels right." The use of his first name, rare in professional settings, underscored the personal dimension of this mission for both of them. Mitchell nodded, squeezing her shoulder briefly. "Your father would be proud," he said simply. Something flickered in Maggie's eyes. Pain, pride, determination, before she returned to full professional mode. "We'll bring them home, sir." The storm continued to rage outside as final preparations were made. The rescue team donned their flight gear, while the ground crew readied the hangar doors. Maggie moved with focused efficiency, her mind already mapping out flight paths and contingencies. As she strapped into the pilot's seat, memories surfaced of her father's lessons in this very same aircraft type. His voice seemed to echo in her mind. "Respect the machine, Maggie, but never fear it. Understand its soul, and it will take care of you." Captain Anderson settled into the co-pilot seat beside her, his initial skepticism now replaced by professional focus. Behind them, Parker, Harris, and Martinez secured their positions, the tension in the cabin palpable but controlled. Maggie ran through the pre-flight checks with practiced precision, feeling the Blackhawk respond to her commands with newfound harmony. The engines hummed with healthy power, all systems now operating in perfect synchronization after her unconventional intervention. "Canyon Rescue Mission, this is Nellis Control," came the radio call. "You are cleared for immediate takeoff. Weather conditions are deteriorating rapidly. Exercise extreme caution." Maggie acknowledged the clearance as the massive hangar doors rolled open, revealing a world transformed by driving rain and gusting winds. Lightning flashed across the dark sky, momentarily illuminating the challenging conditions that awaited them. "All crew, final communications check," Maggie called out. Each crew member responded in turn, their voices steady despite the pressure. "Nellis Tower Rescue 1 requesting immediate departure clearance," Maggie transmitted. "Rescue 1, you are cleared for immediate departure. Godspeed." With smooth, confident movements, Maggie advanced the throttles, feeling the Blackhawk respond with eager power. The rotors spun faster, their distinctive wop-wop-wop building to a thunderous roar that matched the storm outside. As the helicopter lifted off, rising into the teeth of the tempest, Maggie felt a sense of rightness despite the danger ahead. This was what she was born to do, not just fly, but to push the boundaries of what was possible when human intuition and mechanical precision achieved perfect harmony. The Blackhawk climbed steadily into the storm-darkened sky, banking westward toward the Grand Canyon, where 26 lives awaited salvation. The mission that had begun with mechanical failure now continued on the wings of technical brilliance and raw human courage. Inside the cockpit, Major Maggie Sullivan guided the helicopter with the confidence of someone who understood that flying wasn't just about controlling an aircraft, it was about becoming one with it. As the storm raged around them, that partnership would be tested to its limits and beyond. The most dangerous part of their journey had only just begun. The storm clouds had darkened ominously over the Nevada desert, lightning slicing through the sky with increasing frequency. The Blackhawk helicopter shuddered against the powerful winds, vibrations traveling through Major Maggie Sullivan's hands as she gripped the controls. Rain pounded against the windshield, reducing visibility to near zero as they ascended into the turbulent sky. "Wind speed 45 knots and increasing," Maggie announced into her microphone, eyes scanning the instruments. "Base, this is Rescue 1, maintaining course heading toward Grand Canyon sector." "Copy that, Rescue 1. Colonel Mitchell's voice crackled through the radio. "Weather radar shows the storm intensifying faster than predicted. Exercise extreme caution." Maggie studied the horizon ahead, making minor adjustments to their heading. Beside her, Captain Anderson monitored the systems with a tense expression. He was an experienced Blackhawk pilot, but even he recognized the extreme conditions they were flying into. "The helicopter seems to be responding well," Maggie said, feeling the aircraft through the controls. "The repairs appear to be holding." "For now," Anderson replied, his voice carrying a note of lingering doubt. "But as we climb and the pressure changes, the issues might resurface." Maggie nodded silently. She sensed it too, something subtle in the helicopter's behavior that couldn't be quantified in the diagnostics. It was the voice of the machine her father Daniel had taught her to listen for, those minute vibrations and sound patterns that told experienced pilots when something wasn't quite right. In the rear of the helicopter, Lieutenant Jennifer Parker focused intently on her diagnostic equipment, monitoring the systems they had just repaired. Her young face showed fierce concentration. All systems reading within normal parameters. Fuel management and engine control modules maintaining stable integration. Good news, Sergeant Harris acknowledged. As crew chief, he was responsible for all equipment and passengers once they reached their destination. Let's hope it stays that way. Lightning flashed nearby, and the rain intensified, hammering against the airframe. Maggie listened intently to the engine sounds through her headset, noticing a subtle shift in tone. Her intuition triggered a warning. "Lieutenant Parker, check the fuel flow to engine 2, she ordered. "I'm sensing a minor fluctuation." "Checking now," Parker responded immediately, studying her monitors. "Readings show within normal parameters, but wait, there's a microfluctuation. Values are cycling within 0.5% of standard." "Just as I thought," Maggie murmured. Anderson shot her a surprised glance. "How did you pick that up? It's well below the threshold that would trigger any warnings." "Something my father taught me," Maggie replied, making slight adjustments to the controls. "Machines have their own rhythm, like a heartbeat. Changes in that rhythm are warning signs before problems manifest." Her experience in the FA-18 was serving her well. The training to endure 9G forces had heightened her sensory awareness, allowing her to detect subtle changes that might otherwise go unnoticed. It was like a sixth sense, a survival mechanism honed through thousands of flight hours in some of the world's most demanding aircraft. "I'm switching flight controls to manual mode and increasing parameters on engine 2 by 3%, Maggie decided. "That should compensate for the fuel delivery fluctuation." Anderson frowned. "That's outside standard operating procedure." "Sometimes we need to go beyond procedure," Maggie replied calmly. "This helicopter is telling us what it needs. We just have to listen and respond accordingly." Anderson considered for a moment, then nodded. "I'll follow your lead." After the adjustment, the engine note stabilized, and the vibrations through the airframe diminished. Parker confirmed the readings, smiling slightly. "Parameters stabilizing, engine performance is improving." Maggie nodded with satisfaction. Her instinct had been correct, but she knew better than to relax. This storm was just beginning. They continued flying, drawing closer to the Grand Canyon. The rain and wind intensified, visibility deteriorating rapidly. Maggie had to make constant adjustments to maintain their altitude and speed. "Base, this is Rescue 1, she transmitted. "Current position 30 miles northeast of Grand Canyon. Weather conditions extremely severe. Limited visibility, heavy turbulence, ETA approximately 25 minutes. "Copy, Rescue 1, Colonel Mitchell's voice responded. "Latest from Canyon Outpost indicates water levels still rising, concerns about stability of their refuge point. Expedite arrival if possible." Maggie felt the urgency of their situation. Thinking of Katie, her determination strengthened. She would rescue the girl she loved like a goddaughter, no matter what it took. "We can fly faster," she said to Anderson. "It will exceed normal operational limits, but we still have safety margin." Anderson looked concerned, but didn't object. "Your call." Maggie pushed the throttle forward, and the Black Hawk accelerated through the storm. The airframe shuddered against the powerful wind gusts, but she maintained perfect control, executing each adjustment with precision. "Major Sullivan, I'm detecting something unusual," Parker suddenly called out. "It's not showing on the diagnostic system, but there are irregular voltage spikes in the electrical grid." Maggie reacted instantly. "Lightning risk, dropping altitude to establish lower flight profile." At that exact moment, lightning cracked nearby, filling the cabin with blinding light. In the cockpit, multiple warning indicators illuminated simultaneously. "Electrical anomaly," Anderson shouted. "Multiple systems going offline." The Black Hawk suddenly rolled left and began losing altitude rapidly. Maggie pulled back on the controls with both hands, fighting to regain stability. Her face showed intense concentration, but not a trace of panic. "Switching to manual override," she commanded. "Activate backup power. Lieutenant Parker, bypass main electrical system and route power directly to essential flight components." Parker moved instantly, shifting from the diagnostic equipment to the control panel. Her hands worked with remarkable speed, reconfiguring circuits according to Maggie's instructions. Done, she reported. Power restored to essential systems. Maggie focused intensely, feeling the helicopter respond through the control stick. She maintained the same calm she had experienced during G-force training in her FA-18. The neural pathways forged during extreme conditions in fighter jets were now serving her in this emergency. Gradually, the Black Hawk began responding to her commands. The roll stabilized, and the altitude loss slowed. I have control back, she announced quietly. But we've sustained damage to multiple systems. Navigation system offline, radar non-functional. We'll need to switch to visual flight, Anderson said, then faltered. Though in this visibility. His words trailed off. The view ahead was nearly obscured completely. Heavy rain and low clouds created a gray wall before them. We press on, Maggie decided. I know the general location of the canyon. We'll approach low, watching for terrain features. That's extremely dangerous, Anderson warned. The canyon walls are unpredictable. Without visual reference, collision risk is extremely high. I understand the risk, Maggie replied calmly. But we have 26 people waiting for us. It's a race against time. Sensing her resolve, Anderson nodded. What's your approach? I'll trust my G-sense, Maggie answered it. In the F/A-18, I learned to feel the movement of the aircraft and the flow of air around it, even when visibility was compromised. The same principles apply here. She glanced at the altimeter, guiding the helicopter lower. The rain continued to pound against the windshield, the wipers struggling against the deluge. Sergeant Harris, secure all equipment in the cabin, Maggie ordered. Turbulence will increase. Lieutenant Martinez, ensure medical equipment is prepared for any eventuality. The crew complied, each preparing at their station. As Maggie piloted the helicopter, she recalled her father's words. In your most dangerous moments, trust your instincts. When training and experience are in your bones, your body knows the right answer before your mind does. She closed her eyes for just a moment, focusing on her senses. The vibrations of the helicopter, the sound of the engines, the direction of wind buffeting the airframe, all provided information. Banking 5 degrees right, she said, opening her eyes and adjusting the controls. Reducing altitude 50 feet. Anderson watched with uncertainty, but confirmed her instructions. Minutes later, the clouds briefly parted, revealing the massive outline of the Grand Canyon ahead. Her instinctual navigation had guided them precisely to their destination. Incredible, Anderson couldn't hide his amazement. How did you know? Hard to explain, Maggie replied. Years of flight time and my father's teachings. Suddenly, the radio crackled with a weak but audible transmission. This is Canyon, post, position, 36 degrees, 112 degrees. The signal faded in and out. Canyon outpost, this is Rescue 1, Maggie responded. Your signal is weak, please repeat. Again, the broken transmission came through, clearer this time. This is Canyon outpost. Coordinates 36 degrees, 12 minutes north, 112 degrees, 5 minutes west. Deploying red smoke signal, water rising rapidly, situation critical. Copy that, Maggie replied, approaching your position. We'll attempt landing upon visual confirmation of smoke signal. Have everyone ready for immediate evacuation. She adjusted their course, heading toward the coordinates. Visibility remained poor, but occasional breaks in the clouds allowed glimpses of the canyon below. What was normally a majestic landscape had transformed into a terrifying scene of raging floodwaters crashing against rocky walls. There, Anderson pointed forward, where a faint red mist was becoming visible through the rain. Smoke signal spotted! Maggie directed the helicopter toward the signal, approaching cautiously. Gradually, a small rocky ledge came into view. A group of people were huddled together. Children gathered in the center, with adults forming a protective circle around them. Water was already beginning to erode the edges of their refuge, their safe ground shrinking by the minute. Landing zone identified, Maggie announced into her microphone. However, space is extremely limited. We'll need to hover for extraction. The situation was worse than they had anticipated. The ledge was small, clearly too narrow to accommodate everyone at once. Additionally, the strong winds and heavy rain made maintaining a stable hover incredibly challenging. We'll need to extract in 2 trips, Maggie decided. Children and injured first, the rest on second return. Anderson assessed the situation and agreed. Wise decision, but holding a hover in this wind will be extremely difficult. Maintaining stability will be challenging. I'll manage, Maggie said with determination. She guided the Black Hawk over the ledge, beginning a careful descent. A sudden gust of wind pushed the helicopter sideways, but Maggie instantly corrected, stabilizing the aircraft. "Harris, Martinez," she commanded, "deploy ropes and begin extraction. Lieutenant Martinez, prioritize injured individuals." The crew opened the doors, letting in powerful gusts of wind. Harris prepared the rescue harnesses, beginning to lower ropes to the people below. Martinez readied medical equipment, preparing to receive and assess the evacuees. Maggie focused every nerve on keeping the helicopter as stable as possible. With each gust of wind, she made micro-adjustments, maintaining their position. Sweat beaded on her forehead, her face a mask of absolute concentration. "I see Katie," Parker called out, "center of the group." Maggie allowed herself a quick glance downward, spotting the blonde-haired girl. She was with the other children, surrounded by adults. Though fear was evident on Katie's face, she stood bravely, trying to comfort the smaller children. She's a brave one, Maggie thought, just like her mother. The first children were secured in harnesses and began being lifted into the helicopter. Martinez received them, immediately wrapping them in blankets and checking their conditions. The extraction continued, one person after another climbing aboard the helicopter. But time wasn't on their side. The water level continued rising relentlessly, and the ledge was becoming increasingly unstable. "The ledge is starting to crumble," Anderson warned. In that instant, a section of the rock shelf collapsed, causing two adults to slip toward the edge. They scrambled desperately to hold on to the remaining section. "Descending," Maggie decided instantly, lowering the helicopter further. "Need to get closer to them." Harris threw additional ropes, reaching out to the slipping individuals. Dangerously low and close to the canyon wall, Maggie maintained perfect control of the helicopter. "Got them!" Harris shouted. He secured the two people firmly and began pulling them up. The rescue continued until all children and injured individuals were safely aboard the helicopter. Katie was among them. When she spotted Maggie, her face lit up with relief. "Aunt Maggie!" she cried out. "I knew you'd come!" Maggie smiled back briefly, but quickly returned to the reality of their situation. They still needed to rescue the remaining adults. However, the helicopter was already approaching capacity, nearing its weight limit with the current passengers. "Base, this is Rescue 1, she transmitted. "We have all children and injured aboard. 10 adults still remain. Due to weight restrictions, we need to return to base, offload passengers, then return for the others." "Copy that, Rescue 1, Colonel Mitchell responded. "However, weather radar indicates conditions worsening. Expedite your actions." Maggie signaled to the remaining adults below, indicating they would return soon. They nodded in understanding. "We'll be back in 20 minutes, she promised through the loudspeaker. The helicopter began gaining altitude, turning back toward the base. But just then, an ominous sound came from the engines. "Engine 1 malfunctioned! Function," Anderson shouted. "RPM's dropping." Maggie immediately checked the instruments. Engine 1's RPMs were decreasing rapidly, warning lights flashing. "Lightning strike damage is manifesting," she assessed. "Systems are deteriorating." The situation was critical. Even at full capacity, flying with a single engine was challenging. And now they were loaded with passengers. Redistributing fuel flow, Maggie quickly decided. Maximum power to Engine 2. "Lieutenant Parker." "Parker, concentrate backup power to engine control systems." Parker complied, rerouting power. "Done!" "Opening emergency fuel lines," Maggie continued, her hands moving swiftly, implementing procedures not typically recommended in standard operations. "That's risky," Anderson cautioned. "It could destabilize the entire fuel system." "What's riskier is crashing," Maggie replied coolly. "I'll take responsibility." Her actions began showing effect. Engine 1 stabilized at a low but consistent RPM, while Engine 2 provided increased output. "It will hold," she reported, "but the flight back to base will be demanding. Everyone, secure your harnesses." They continued through the storm, Maggie constantly monitoring the controls and instruments, making endless adjustments. Tension showed on her face, but her piloting never lost its precision. "The G-force training is helping," she murmured to herself, maintaining focus under extreme pressure. Suddenly, the helicopter lurched violently. New warning lights illuminated. "Hydraulic system failure," Anderson reported. "Pressure dropping." "Switching to manual controls," Maggie responded instantly. She transitioned to non-hydraulic assisted control, feeling the strain immediately in her arm muscles. "We're not far from base," she said through gritted teeth. "Just need to hold together." The helicopter's condition was deteriorating rapidly. Engine 1 was on the verge of complete failure, and the hydraulic system was non-functional. Maggie was keeping the aircraft airborne through pure strength and skill. "We need to divert," she decided. "Can't make it to base." Looking for open terrain nearby, she scanned desperately through the limited visibility, searching for a suitable landing spot. Through breaks in the rain and clouds, she spotted a flat desert area ahead. "Landing there," she announced. "Everyone brace for impact." Maggie began descending the Black Hawk. The wind was fierce, control extremely difficult, but she maintained her focus. "Control stiffening," she muttered. Her arm muscles burned with the effort of flying without hydraulic assistance, but she refused to give up. Inch by inch, she guided the helicopter toward the landing zone. "Almost there." The ground approached. Maggie summoned her remaining strength to execute the final maneuvers. The Black Hawk made contact with the desert floor. The impact was hard, but she had managed to minimize the forces. The aircraft skidded along the ground before finally coming to a complete stop. "Status report, everyone," Maggie called out. One by one, crew and passengers confirmed they were unharmed. Miraculously, no one had sustained serious injuries. "Base, this is Rescue 1, Maggie attempted to communicate. "Emergency landing executed. Position is..." She glanced momentarily at the GPS, only to find the system offline. "Position uncertain. Approximately 15 miles southwest of base in desert terrain. All personnel safe. However, helicopter sustained significant damage. Also, 10 individuals remain stranded at Canyon. Immediate assistance required." The transmission was weak and intermittent, but appeared to get through. "Rescue 1, this is base." Colonel Mitchell's voice came through with static. "Your signal is weak but received. Dispatching rescue team to your position. However, due to storm conditions, arrival will be delayed." Maggie assessed their situation. They had landed safely. Lives were saved. But people remained stranded at the canyon. Time was not on their side. "Lieutenant Parker," she called, "I want you to conduct a detailed assessment of the helicopter's condition. Let's explore repair possibilities." Parker looked surprised. "Repairs? In this condition?" "It's worth attempting," Maggie replied. "There are still people out there. We can't abandon them." Katie came to her side. The girl's clothes were soaked, but her eyes shone with courage and determination. "Aunt Maggie, are you going back for the teachers?" she asked. Maggie placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'll do everything possible, I promise." She stood up, looking at the damaged helicopter. The situation seemed hopeless, but determination burned in her heart. Her father's words echoed in her mind once again. The impossible is sometimes just the untried. The storm continued raging around them. Time was ticking away, and the situation for those left at the canyon was deteriorating. Major Maggie Sullivan faced the greatest challenge of her career. To complete what seemed an impossible mission, she would have to push beyond limits once again. Just as she had endured 9 G-forces in her FA-18, she now battled a different kind of pressure. But this time, not only her life hung in the balance, but the lives of many others. Engineering knowledge and piloting instinct, technology and intuition. She would need all these to overcome the trials ahead. "Lieutenant Parker," Maggie said, her voice carrying new resolve. "Let's examine the electrical system first. The lightning strike may have damaged components, but the core systems might be salvageable." Parker nodded, gathering her diagnostic tools. "I'll start with the main circuit panel." Maggie turned to Captain Anderson. "Can you check the hydraulic lines? Look for ruptures or leaks that might be repairable with our emergency kit." Anderson appeared skeptical, but moved to comply. "I'll do what I can, but I've never seen a bird this damaged fly again without proper maintenance facilities." "This isn't about restoring it to perfect condition," Maggie explained, moving toward the engine compartment. "It's about making it functional enough for one more flight. Those people at the canyon have less than an hour before that ledge completely erodes." The passengers had been moved to a makeshift shelter created from emergency blankets, supervised by Martinez, who was checking everyone for injuries or signs of shock. Harris was securing the immediate area, setting up emergency beacons despite the storm's interference. Katie approached Maggie again as she worked, holding a small flashlight from the emergency kit. "Can I help?" the 12-year-old asked, her voice steady despite the circumstances. Maggie looked at her goddaughter with pride. "You can hold this flashlight for me. I need to see inside this panel." Working side by side, they removed the access panel to the engine control system. Maggie examined the complex array of electronics, looking for signs of damage. There, she pointed to a charred section of circuitry. Lightning followed this path through the system. It jumped from the airframe to the engine management computer, then into the hydraulic control module. Katie held the light steady. "Can you fix it?" "Not completely," Maggie admitted, "but maybe we can bypass the damaged sections." Parker joined them, carrying her diagnostic tablet. "Major, I've completed the initial assessment. The primary electrical bus is damaged beyond field repair, but the secondary systems are largely intact. If we reroute through the emergency circuits, we could restore partial functionality." Maggie finished her thought. "Exactly what I was thinking." For the next 20 minutes, they worked feverishly through the storm. Anderson discovered a repairable hydraulic leak. Harris found ways to secure loose components with emergency restraints. Parker reconfigured the electrical routing, bypassing damaged sections. Maggie coordinated their efforts, applying her unique combination of fighter pilot precision and mechanical intuition. She had learned from her father that machines were more than the sum of their parts. They were integrated systems that sometimes required unconventional approaches. "The fuel management system is our biggest concern," she explained to the team gathered around the engine compartment. "Without it functioning properly, we risk engine flameout at the worst possible moment." "The standard approach would be complete replacement," Anderson noted. "We can't do that here." "No," Maggie agreed, "but we can create a manual override. In the F/A-18, we trained for scenarios where digital systems failed. The principles are the same. Create a direct mechanical link that bypasses the electronics. Using components from the emergency repair kit and materials improvised from the helicopter's interior, they fabricated a crude but potentially effective bypass system. It would require constant manual adjustment during flight, but it might work." "This goes against every maintenance protocol in the book," Anderson observed as they completed the modifications. "Sometimes the book doesn't cover your situation," Maggie responded. "My father once told me that regulations are written for standard conditions. In non-standard conditions, you have to adapt." As they worked, Colonel Mitchell's voice occasionally came through their radio, providing updates. The rescue team was struggling through the storm. The remaining people at the canyon were reporting rising water levels. The situation was becoming increasingly desperate. "They won't make it in time," Maggie concluded after the latest transmission. She looked at their makeshift repairs, then at her team. "We need to attempt a return flight. The repairs won't hold for long, but they might get us there and back one more time." Anderson looked at the helicopter, then at the storm still raging around them. "The risk assessment on this would be off the charts. We'd be flying a severely damaged aircraft into catastrophic weather conditions, with manual overrides on critical systems." "What's the alternative?" Maggie asked quietly. "Those people die." A heavy silence fell over the group. Finally, Anderson straightened his shoulders. "I'll prep for immediate departure." I'm coming too," Parker said firmly. "So am I," Harris added. Maggie nodded, grateful for their courage. "Martinez stays here with the passengers. We fly with minimal weight, just the four of us." "5," came Katie's voice. They turned to see her standing resolute nearby. "I'm coming too." "Absolutely not," Maggie said immediately. "It's too dangerous." "The teacher stayed behind so we could go first," Katie insisted. "Mr. Crawford is out there. He's the one who helped me when Mom died. I can help hold the flashlight for Lieutenant Parker if something needs fixing during the flight." Maggie was about to refuse again when she saw something in Katie's eyes. The same determination she had seen in her own mirror as a young pilot. The girl had her mother's spirit. "You stay strapped in at all times," Maggie said finally. "And you follow every order instantly, no questions." Katie nodded solemnly. "Yes, ma'am." They prepared for departure, Martinez organizing the remaining passengers to move away from the takeoff zone. The storm had diminished slightly, but conditions remained treacherous. Maggie completed the abbreviated pre-flight checks, noting how many systems remained in the red. This would not be a normal flight by any measure. "Our standard operating procedure is now simply this," she told her crew as they boarded. "Get there, get those people, get back. Everything else is secondary." One by one, they confirmed readiness. Anderson as co-pilot, Parker monitoring their makeshift systems, Harris prepared for the rescue operation, and Katie securely strapped in beside Parker. "Base, this is Rescue 1, Maggie transmitted, attempting emergency restart and return to canyon coordinates. Be advised, this aircraft is operating well outside normal parameters." Colonel Mitchell's voice came back, concern evident despite the static. "Maggie, The risk assessment on this operation is my responsibility, she finished. Those people need us now, not when the storm clears. There was a pause, then, understood. Good luck and Godspeed, Rescue 1. Maggie began the start sequence, feeling the damaged helicopter respond sluggishly to her commands. The first engine coughed, struggled, then caught with an uneven rhythm. The second followed, its pitch slightly higher than normal. Hydraulic pressure minimal but present, Anderson reported. Manual flight controls responding. Electrical systems holding at 40% capacity, Parker added. Rerouted power maintaining essential functions. Maggie felt the vibrations through the airframe, sensing the helicopter's condition through her hands and feet. It wasn't pretty, but it would fly, at least for a while. This is like flying with one wing and half an engine, she commented. But I've practiced worse scenarios in simulators. She increased power, feeling the rotors bite into the stormy air. The Black Hawk shuddered, protested, but began to lift from the desert floor. For a moment, it seemed to hang uncertainly, then committed to flight, rising into the turbulent sky. "We're airborne," Maggie announced, her voice controlled despite the struggle evident in her arms as she managed the controls. Setting course for canyon coordinates. The helicopter flew awkwardly, requiring constant adjustments. The makeshift repairs held, but systems fluctuated unpredictably. Every minute brought new challenges, as Maggie battled both the storm and the aircraft's damaged condition. "Engine 1 temperature rising," Anderson warned after 10 minutes of flight. "Approaching red line." "Lieutenant Parker, reduce electrical load on the primary bus," Maggie ordered. "Captain Anderson will need to adjust the manual fuel flow. Reduce by 2%, then compensate on engine 2. They worked in perfect coordination, each understanding the urgency of their mission. Katie watched in silent admiration, holding a flashlight ready whenever Parker needed to check connections. Visibility improved slightly as they approached the canyon, the storm's intensity variable across the region. Through breaks in the clouds, they could see the flooded canyon below, brown water raging through the normally serene landscape. "I have visual on the extraction point," Anderson announced, pointing to the now familiar ledge. "Water level has risen significantly. The ledge is half the size it was before." Maggie saw it too, and the desperate group of people huddled on the increasingly precarious refuge. Their situation had deteriorated drastically in the short time since the first extraction. "Their position is critical," she assessed. "That ledge could give way any minute." She guided the damaged helicopter toward the site, fighting crosswinds and mechanical issues with every movement. The approach was far from textbook, but she maintained control through sheer determination and skill. "Prepare for hover extraction," she instructed. "We won't have time for multiple attempts. Everyone goes at once." "The weight limitations," Anderson began, "are suspended for this operation," Maggie finished. "We'll deal with those consequences when everyone's aboard." She positioned the helicopter above the ledge, maintaining a precarious hover despite the gusting winds and mechanical protests from the aircraft. Harris prepared the rescue harnesses and ropes, ready to deploy. Below, the stranded group looked up with desperate hope. They had been watching the water rise inch by inch, their safe ground disappearing beneath their feet. "Beginning extraction now," Harris announced, deploying the rescue equipment. The operation proceeded with urgent efficiency. One by one, the remaining adults were secured and lifted aboard. The helicopter sank noticeably with each additional person, its engines straining against the increasing weight. "Engine parameters critical," Parker reported as the 8th person climbed aboard. "We're exceeding maximum operational weight by 12%. 2 more to go," Maggie responded, her focus unwavering. "We'll make it." The final 2 survivors were pulled aboard just as a large section of the ledge collapsed into the raging water. Harris secured the cabin door, giving Maggie the all-clear signal. "Everyone aboard," he confirmed. 14 passengers plus crew. Maggie began to lift the overloaded helicopter, feeling the enormous strain through the controls. The aircraft rose sluggishly, struggling against gravity and mechanical limitations. "We need more altitude to clear the canyon rim," Anderson said, concern evident in his voice. "Current climb rate is insufficient." "Diverting all remaining power to engines," Parker announced, making emergency adjustments to their already compromised electrical system. The helicopter continued its labored ascent, inches becoming feet, feet becoming yards. Maggie coaxed every bit of performance from the straining aircraft, her hands making constant micro-adjustments to maintain stability. "Come on," she whispered to the helicopter. "You can do this. Just a little more." As they approached the canyon rim, Engine 1 sputtered, its warning indicators flashing critical alerts. The helicopter lurched dangerously to one side. "Engine 1 failing!" Anderson shouted. "Complete shutdown imminent!" "Not yet," Maggie countered, making rapid adjustments to their makeshift systems. "We're almost clear of the canyon. Just 30 more seconds." She pulled on the controls, willing the helicopter higher with a combination of technical skill and sheer determination. Katie watched from her seat, eyes wide but steady, as Maggie fought the greatest flying challenge of her career. With a final surge of power, they cleared the canyon rim, the helicopter shuddering with the effort. Almost immediately afterward, Engine 1 shut down completely, sending warning alarms blaring through the cockpit. "Single engine operation," Maggie announced calmly, despite the crisis. Adjusting flight profile for optimal performance. She lowered their altitude slightly, finding the optimal position for single-engine flight. The Black Hawk was never designed to carry this many people on one engine, especially in storm conditions with significant damage to its systems. "We're beyond the performance charts now," Anderson observed, his voice tense but professional. "Then we'll write new ones," Maggie replied, maintaining her focus. They continued toward the base, the helicopter flying precariously but still airborne. The storm had diminished slightly, offering small mercy as they fought their way home. "Base, this is Rescue 1," Maggie transmitted. "We have extracted all personnel from the canyon, operating on single engine with significant systems damage. 14 passengers plus crew aboard, requesting emergency landing clearance and all available medical personnel on standby." "Copy that, Rescue 1," Mitchell responded, relief evident in his voice despite the professional tone. "Emergency crew standing by. You are cleared for immediate approach on any vector. Repeat, choose your approach path based on aircraft condition, not standard patterns." They were 20 minutes from the base when the hydraulic system began failing completely. The manual controls grew increasingly resistant, requiring tremendous physical effort to operate. "Hydraulic pressure dropping to 0, Anderson reported. "Manual control effectiveness decreasing rapidly." Maggie felt it immediately, the controls becoming leaden in her hands, each adjustment requiring greater force. Her arms burned with fatigue, but she refused to yield. "Lieutenant Parker, route emergency power to the hydraulic pump motor," she ordered. "We need just enough pressure to maintain minimal control authority." Parker complied, but the results were limited. Minimal pressure restored, but it's unstable. System could fail completely any moment. In the passenger compartment, Harris and the rescued personnel could feel the helicopter's deteriorating condition. Katie remained strapped in her seat, watching Maggie with unwavering faith. "We can see the base," Anderson announced suddenly, pointing through a break in the clouds. 8 miles ahead." Maggie nodded, her arms straining against the increasingly resistant controls. "Prepare for potential emergency landing. We may not make it all the way to the helipad." She assessed their options, calculating fuel reserves, mechanical endurance, and optimal approach vectors. The base appeared and disappeared through the clouds, tantalizing in its proximity yet still challenging to reach. As they approached the final miles, the second engine began showing signs of stress, its temperature gauge climbing into the yellow warning zone. "Engine 2 overheating," Anderson reported. 5 minutes maximum at current power settings. Sings. "Reducing power slightly," Maggie responded, adjusting the throttle with precise movements. "We'll extend engine life at the cost of airspeed." Their progress slowed, but the base grew larger ahead. They were going to make it, barely, but they would make it. 3 miles from the base, the hydraulic system failed completely. The controls locked up, requiring tremendous physical strength to move even slightly. "Complete hydraulic failure," Anderson called out, adding his strength to the controls. Maggie gritted her teeth, pulling the cyclic with every ounce of her strength. The muscles in her arms screamed in protest, pushed well beyond normal endurance. "I can hold it," she managed, her voice strained but determined. "Get everyone ready for immediate evacuation upon landing." Harris relayed the instructions to the passengers, preparing them for a potentially rough touchdown. Parker monitored the failing systems, providing what assistance she could through their improvised controls. The base helipad came into view, emergency vehicles already positioned around its perimeter. Maggie guided the crippled helicopter on its final approach, fighting the controls every inch of the way. 200 feet, Anderson called out. "Descent rate acceptable, wind from the right at 15 knots. Maggie made her final adjustments, compensating for the crosswind while managing their descent rate with the failing controls. Her face showed intense concentration, sweat running down her temples despite the cool air from the storm. 100 feet. The helicopter descended steadily, aligned with the center of the helipad. Emergency crews watched tensely as the damaged aircraft approached. 50 feet. Maggie prepared for touchdown, adjusting the collective with her last reserves of strength. The Black Hawk responded sluggishly but remained under control. 10 feet. With perfect timing, Maggie executed the landing maneuver. The helicopter settled onto the helipad with a firm but controlled impact, its skids squealing against the concrete. "We're down," she announced, her voice betraying exhaustion for the first time. "Shutdown complete." Emergency crews rushed forward as the rotors spun down. Medical teams began assisting passengers, while fire crews stood ready for any potential hazards from the damaged aircraft. Colonel Mitchell was among the first to approach as Maggie emerged from the cockpit, her flight suit soaked with sweat, her arms trembling from exertion. "You did it," he said simply, placing a hand on her shoulder. "All 26 rescued. No casualties." Maggie nodded, too exhausted for words. She watched as Katie ran to her, throwing her arms around her waist. "You were amazing, Aunt Maggie," the girl exclaimed. "Just like Dad always said you were." The comment caught Maggie by surprise. "Your father talked about me?" Katie nodded enthusiastically. "All the time. He said you were the best pilot he ever trained with, that you had something special no one could teach." Emotion welled up in Maggie's throat. She embraced Katie tightly, momentarily overwhelmed by the connection to her deceased friend. The rest of the crew gathered around them: Anderson, Parker, Harris, and Martinez, who had rejoined them after caring for the first group of evacuees. Despite their exhaustion, their faces showed the unique satisfaction that comes from overcoming impossible odds. "I've been flying for 20 years, Anderson said, shaking his head in amazement. "I've never seen anyone handle an aircraft like that. By every performance metric, that helicopter shouldn't have made it back." "Metrics don't account for everything," Maggie replied, finding her voice again. "Sometimes you have to go beyond the numbers and listen to what the aircraft is telling you." Parker stepped forward, her expression earnest. "Major Sullivan, I've learned more in these few hours than in years of technical training. Would you consider mentoring me?" Maggie smiled, seeing something of herself in the young lieutenant. "I'd be honored. The Air Force needs more engineers who understand that machines have souls." Colonel Mitchell gathered them together, his weathered face showing pride. "The storm is passing. Looks like we've weathered it in more ways than one. There will be debriefings and reports to file, but those can wait until tomorrow. For now, you've all earned some rest." As the group dispersed, Mitchell held Maggie back for a moment. "Daniel would be proud," he said quietly. "What you did today was extraordinary." "I had a good teacher," she replied, looking up at the clearing sky where stars were beginning to appear. "Two good teachers, actually." Later that evening, after medical checks and preliminary debriefings, Maggie sat alone in the officers' lounge, a cup of coffee warming her hands. The adrenaline had long since faded, leaving bone-deep fatigue in its wake. But with the fatigue came a profound sense of accomplishment. Her phone buzzed with a message from Mitchell. "Engineering team examined the Black Hawk. They're calling it a miracle it flew at all. Chief engineer wants to understand your bypass method. Says it's unconventional but brilliant." Maggie smiled to herself. Unconventional but brilliant. Her father had been described the same way throughout his career. The apple hadn't fallen far from the tree after all. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Lieutenant Parker stood there, looking somewhat hesitant. "Sorry to disturb you, Major, but I wanted to give you this." She handed Maggie a small flash drive. "I recorded all our diagnostic data during the mission. I thought you might want it for your records." Maggie accepted it with a nod of thanks. "Good thinking, Lieutenant. This could be valuable for improving emergency protocols." Parker lingered for a moment. "May I ask you something, Major?" "Oh, of course." "How did you know?" "About the microfluctuations, the system integrations, the bypass methods. None of it was in any manual I've ever studied." Maggie considered the question thoughtfully. "Do you know what G-Force training really teaches you, Lieutenant?" Parker shook her head. "Everyone focuses on the physical aspects. The pressure, the strain, the techniques to prevent blackout. But the most valuable lesson is psychological. When you're at 9G and your vision is tunneling, your body screaming for oxygen, you learn something crucial. There's a difference between what's theoretically possible and what's actually possible when you push beyond conventional limits." She looked directly at Parker. The same principle applies to aircraft. Engineers design within safety margins and theoretical limits. But in extreme situations, those margins can be reinterpreted. Not recklessly, but with precise understanding of the underlying principles. Parker nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. So it's not about ignoring the rules. It's about understanding why the rules exist in the first place, Maggie finished. When you truly understand that, you can make informed judgments about when and how to adapt them to unprecedented situations. I want to learn that, Parker said with conviction. Not just the technical aspects, but the intuition. Maggie smiled. That's a journey that never really ends. But I'd be happy to help you start. As Parker left, Maggie turned back to the window, watching as the last clouds from the storm drifted away, revealing a star-filled sky. Tomorrow would bring debriefings, reports, and inevitable questions about her unconventional methods. But tonight, she allowed herself to simply appreciate what they had accomplished. 26 lives, saved by a perfect integration of engineering precision and pilot's intuition, of technology and human instinct, of science and something less definable, that mysterious connection between pilot and aircraft that transcended technical specifications. Her father had called it the soul of flight. Today, Maggie had honored that legacy in the most meaningful way possible. Outside, the repaired Black Hawk sat on the helipad, battered but triumphant, a testament to human ingenuity and determination when engineering meets instinct. The morning sun broke through the dissipating storm clouds, casting golden light across Nellis Air Force Base. Major Maggie Sullivan stood on the observation deck overlooking the maintenance hangar, watching as technicians swarmed around the battered Black Hawk helicopter. The aircraft looked almost unrecognizable after yesterday's ordeal, its frame scarred by lightning, panels missing and makeshift repairs visible throughout its structure. Yet there was something noble about its broken silhouette, a testament to extraordinary resilience. "They're calling it the Miracle Bird now," Colonel Thomas Mitchell said, stepping beside her. His weathered face showed the effects of a largely sleepless night, but his eyes carried unmistakable pride. Engineering team says they've never seen an aircraft in that condition complete a successful flight. They're documenting everything for the training academy. Maggie smiled slightly. The helicopter deserves most of the credit. It wanted to keep flying. "Helicopters don't want things, Maggie," Mitchell replied, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced of his own statement. But pilots who understand them the way you do can make them perform beyond their design limitations. Below them, Chief Master Sergeant Henderson directed the technical inspection, his methodical approach unchanged despite the unusual circumstances. He had arrived at dawn, determined to understand exactly how the severely damaged helicopter had managed to complete its rescue mission. "Henderson has been at it since 0500, Mitchell observed. "He's particularly interested in your fuel system bypass. Says it contradicts everything in the maintenance manuals but worked perfectly." "Sometimes the manuals don't cover every situation," Maggie replied, echoing her father's philosophy. "When standard approaches fail, you have to listen to what the machine is telling you and respond accordingly." Mitchell nodded thoughtfully. Daniel said something similar once, after that incident in '98. The brass wanted to ground him for unauthorized modifications, but couldn't argue with the results. The mention of her father brought a familiar ache to Maggie's heart, but it was tempered now by something else. A sense of connection that had strengthened during yesterday's mission. She had never felt closer to him than when piloting that damaged Black Hawk through impossible conditions. "How are the rescued personnel doing?" she asked, changing the subject. "All stable. The 2 with minor injuries are responding well to treatment. The rest have been debriefed and are preparing to return to their families." Mitchell paused. "Katie's been asking for you. That girl thinks you hung the moon after yesterday." Maggie smiled genuinely this time. "She's a remarkable kid, has her mother's courage." "And her godmother's stubborn determination," Mitchell added with a knowing look. "She told me she wants to be a pilot now." "God help us all," Maggie laughed softly. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Lieutenant Jennifer Parker, who approached with a tablet in hand and an excited expression on her young face. "Major Sullivan," she greeted with a crisp salute, "I've completed the preliminary analysis of our flight data. The results are, well, they're extraordinary." "At ease, Lieutenant," Maggie replied. "What have you found?" Parker activated her tablet, displaying a series of complex graphs and technical readouts. By all standard performance metrics, that helicopter should never have remained airborne after the lightning strike, let alone completed the mission with a full passenger load on a single engine. And yet it did, Mitchell noted. Yes, sir, Parker continued eagerly. I've been analyzing the minute adjustments Major Sullivan made throughout the flight, the timing, the precision, the way she anticipated system fluctuations before they registered on instruments. There's a pattern to it that defies conventional flight control theory. She scrolled to another screen. Look at these engine performance graphs. Somehow she maintained optimal thrust distribution even as systems were failing catastrophically. The timing of her adjustments preceded the warning indicators by an average of 4.6 seconds. Maggie studied the data with interest. What had been instinct and sensation to her appeared as clear mathematical patterns in Parker's analysis. "What are you proposing, Lieutenant?" Mitchell asked. "With your permission, sir, I'd like to develop a new training module based on Major Sullivan's techniques." Parker's eyes shone with enthusiasm. Combining advanced engineering principles with enhanced sensory awareness training could revolutionize how we handle aircraft in crisis situations. Mitchell considered the request for a moment, then nodded. "Proceed, Lieutenant. Coordinate with Training Division and keep me updated on your progress." "Thank you, sir," Parker beamed before turning to Maggie. "And Major, I was hoping you might consider serving as the primary consultant. No one else has demonstrated this level of integration between technical knowledge and intuitive aircraft understanding." Before Maggie could respond, the hangar doors below opened to admit Captain Anderson, walking with a slight limp from yesterday's hard landing, but otherwise appearing recovered. He approached Chief Henderson and engaged in what appeared to be an animated discussion about the helicopter's condition. "Looks like your co-pilot has some thoughts to share," Mitchell observed. "He filed a remarkable report this morning, particularly coming from someone who initially questioned your methods." Maggie watched as Anderson gestured toward various parts of the damaged helicopter, his body language suggesting intense engagement rather than criticism. Good pilots are always learning. It's part of what keeps them alive. "Speaking of learning," Mitchell said, his tone shifting to something more formal, "Brigadier General Harrison will be arriving at 1400 hours. He's taken a personal interest in yesterday's events." Maggie tensed slightly. General Harrison headed the Air Combat Command's Training and Readiness Division, not someone typically involved in routine rescue operations. "Should I be concerned?" she asked directly. "Quite the opposite," Mitchell assured her. "After reviewing the preliminary reports, he wants to discuss potential applications for your methods across multiple aircraft platforms. This could be an important opportunity, Maggie." Before their conversation could continue, Sergeant Crawford, one of the civilians rescued from the canyon, appeared at the observation deck entrance. The large man's normally imposing presence seemed subdued, his expression uncharacteristically hesitant. "Major Sullivan," he began, stepping forward with a military precision that revealed his own service background. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," Maggie replied. "How are you feeling, Sergeant?" "Physically fine, ma'am." He paused, clearly searching for words. "I wanted to thank you personally before departing. What you did yesterday. I've served with some extraordinary pilots during my career, but never witnessed flying like that." His gaze dropped momentarily. "I also owe you an apology. When you first arrived to fix the helicopter, I made assumptions based on prejudices I should have abandoned long ago. I was wrong, and I'm deeply sorry." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Maggie extended her hand, which he shook firmly. "No apology necessary, Sergeant. We all have our moments of doubt." Crawford shook his head. "It's more than that, ma'am. I've spent 20 years teaching young men and women about courage and leadership through the Veterans Teaching Courage program. Yesterday, you gave me the most powerful lesson I've ever received on those subjects. I won't forget it." After Crawford departed, Mitchell gave Maggie a knowing look. "You've made quite an impression." It's not easy for a man of Crawford's generation and background to admit he was wrong. "People can surprise you," Maggie replied thoughtfully. "Just like machines." Throughout the morning, Maggie divided her time between debriefings, medical checkups, and conversations with the technical team analyzing the damaged helicopter. Each discussion revealed new aspects of yesterday's miracle flight, from the improvised electrical routing that had somehow maintained essential systems to the precise control inputs that had kept the aircraft stable despite catastrophic failures. Shortly before noon, she found time to visit the base hospital, where Katie was staying for observation along with the other rescued children. The girl's face brightened immediately when Maggie entered. "Aunt Maggie," she exclaimed, jumping up from her bed. "They said you might be too busy to visit." "Never too busy for you, kiddo," Maggie replied, embracing her goddaughter. "How are you feeling?" "I'm fine," Katie insisted. "The doctors are just being extra careful because of the storm and everything. They said we can probably leave tomorrow." Maggie sat beside her on the bed, noting how the girl seemed different somehow. A new confidence in her posture, a steadiness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "I've been thinking," Katie said after a moment, "about Mom and about yesterday." Maggie waited patiently, recognizing the thoughtful expression that had so often crossed her friend's face before Katie was born. "Mom always said that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It just means you do what needs doing anyway." Katie looked up at Maggie. "Yesterday, I was really scared, but I kept thinking about what she would do." "Your mom was one of the bravest people I've ever known," Maggie said softly. "She would have been incredibly proud of you yesterday." "I want to be like both of you," Katie declared with sudden determination. "I want to learn to fly." Maggie studied the girl's face, seeing not childish enthusiasm but genuine resolve. "It's a challenging path," she said carefully. "Requires years of dedication and hard work." "I know," Katie nodded seriously. "But after yesterday, I understand why you and Mom loved flying so much. It's not just about being in the air. It's about solving problems and helping people when no one else can." The insight, so mature for a 12-year-old, caught Maggie by surprise. "That's exactly right," she acknowledged. "Will you help me?" Katie asked. "I mean, when I'm older and can start training properly." Maggie felt a curious mixture of emotions, pride, concern, and something deeper that felt like legacy. "I'd be honored," she replied. "But for now, focus on school and growing up. Flying will be waiting when you're ready." Their conversation was interrupted by a nurse announcing that Katie had visitors, the teachers from the Veterans Teaching Courage program who had been rescued in the second extraction. Led by Sergeant Crawford, they had come to check on their young charges before departing. "I should go," Maggie said, standing. "You've got a full house here." Katie caught her hand. "You're coming to dinner next weekend, right? Uncle Tom said you promised." "I'll be there," Maggie assured her. "Maybe we can look at some basic flight principles afterward. Just the theory parts." Katie's delighted smile was answer enough. As afternoon approached, Maggie prepared for her meeting with General Harrison. She changed into a fresh uniform, the ribbons and commendations on her chest, including the Distinguished Flying Cross she had earned during a particularly harrowing mission in Syria 3 years earlier. Looking in the mirror, she thought about how her father would have approached this meeting, with quiet confidence tempered by humility. The briefing room was unusually crowded when she arrived. Besides Colonel Mitchell and General Harrison, she recognized several senior officers from the Air Combat Command, as well as 2 civilian engineers from the Advanced Systems Division. Lieutenant Parker was present as well, looking both nervous and excited. "Major Sullivan," General Harrison greeted her, rising from his seat. Unlike many generals she had encountered, Harrison had a reputation for straightforward communication and genuine interest in operational innovations. "Thank you for joining us on short notice. Please have a seat." Once everyone was settled, Harrison activated the room's display screen, showing high-resolution images of the damaged Black Hawk alongside flight data recordings. "Major, I've reviewed the reports of yesterday's mission," he began. "Frankly, what you accomplished defies conventional analysis. We have pilots with 30 years' experience saying they wouldn't have attempted what you did, let alone succeeded." Maggie maintained a professional demeanor despite the intensity of attention focused on her. "It was a team effort, sir. Lieutenant Parker's technical expertise, Captain Anderson's support, and the exceptional performance of the crew were all critical factors." "Noted and acknowledged," Harrison nodded. "But I'm particularly interested in your approach to aircraft control under extreme conditions. Colonel Mitchell tells me you have a unique methodology developed through your dual qualification on fighters and rotary aircraft." "It's less a formal methodology than an integrated approach, sir," Maggie clarified. "My father taught me to understand aircraft as complete systems, rather than collections of separate components. When something isn't working correctly, the entire aircraft communicates that through subtle changes in performance characteristics." "Your father was Daniel Sullivan," Harrison said, not as a question, but a statement of recognition. I flew with him briefly during Operation Desert Storm. His reputation for unconventional but effective approaches was well established. He turned to the gathered officers and engineers. What interests me most about Major Sullivan's performance yesterday is how it aligns with our next generation combat aircraft initiative. We've been developing advanced neural interface systems to improve pilot response times during critical situations. But Major Sullivan appears to have achieved similar results through training and sensory awareness. One of the civilian engineers, a silver-haired woman with intense focus, leaned forward. Major, the data shows you consistently anticipated system failures before they registered on instruments. Can you describe your sensory experience during these moments? Maggie considered the question carefully. It's similar to what fighter pilots experience during high-G maneuvers. When you're pulling 9G in an F/A-18, your body becomes hypersensitive to the aircraft's behavior. Subtle vibrations, changes in sound patterns, minute shifts in control response. I've found those same principles apply to all aircraft, though the specific sensations differ. Fascinating, the engineer murmured, making notes. Essentially a form of enhanced proprioception applied to machine interfaces. In less technical terms, Maggie added, it's about developing a relationship with the aircraft, understanding its normal patterns so thoroughly that deviations become immediately apparent, even before they're severe enough to trigger warnings. The discussion continued for over an hour, with Maggie explaining her techniques in detail, while the engineers and officers explored potential applications across various aircraft platforms. Lieutenant Parker contributed technical analyses that complemented Maggie's more intuitive descriptions, creating a comprehensive picture of the approach. Finally, General Harrison brought the meeting to its core purpose. Major Sullivan, I'd like to propose a special assignment. We're establishing a new integrated training program at Edwards that combines advanced technical instruction with enhanced sensory awareness techniques. Given your unique qualifications and yesterday's demonstration of their effectiveness, I believe you would be the ideal person to develop and lead this program. The offer caught Maggie by surprise. Her current posting as an FA-18 instructor at Nellis had another year remaining in its rotation. The program would include both fighter and rotary wing components, Harrison continued. You'd have considerable latitude in designing the curriculum, with Lieutenant Parker and a select technical team supporting the engineering aspects. It's an honor to be considered, sir, Maggie replied thoughtfully. May I ask how this would affect my active flight status? You'd maintain full qualification on both the F/A-18 and UH-60, Harrison assured her. In fact, demonstration flights would be an essential component of the training. This isn't about taking you out of the cockpit, Major. It's about allowing you to share your extraordinary abilities with the next generation of pilots. Colonel Mitchell, who had remained mostly silent during the meeting, spoke up. It's a tremendous opportunity, Maggie, the kind that comes along rarely in a career. Maggie considered the proposal, weighing her love for active duty flying against the potential impact of such a program. Her father had always emphasized the importance of passing knowledge to others, of ensuring that hard-won insights weren't lost when individual pilots retired or moved on. I'd like to accept the assignment, sir, she decided, with one condition. General Harrison raised an eyebrow. Which is? That Captain Anderson be included in the instructor cadre, Maggie said. His experience yesterday, transitioning from skepticism to understanding, represents exactly the kind of perspective shift we'd be trying to achieve with students. Harrison exchanged glances with Mitchell, then nodded. Reasonable request. I'll have transfer orders prepared for both of you, effective next month. That should give you time for proper handover of your current duties. As the meeting concluded and the participants began dispersing, Lieutenant Parker approached Maggie with barely contained excitement. Major, I've been assigned to the technical development team for the new program, she said. I can't thank you enough for this opportunity. You earned it, Lieutenant, Maggie replied sincerely. Your quick thinking yesterday saved lives. The way you reconfigured those systems under pressure showed exceptional talent. Parker hesitated, then asked the question clearly foremost in her mind. Do you really think we can teach others to do what you do? To feel an aircraft the way you do? Not everyone will develop the same level of sensitivity, Maggie acknowledged. But even small improvements in how pilots perceive and respond to their aircraft could make critical differences in emergency situations. That's worth pursuing. Later that evening, as sunset painted the desert sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Maggie found herself drawn back to the damaged Blackhawk. The maintenance hangar was quiet now, the day shift having ended hours ago. Only a single technician remained, working under a portable light near the helicopter's tail section. Maggie recognized him immediately, Chief Henderson, still methodically examining the aircraft systems long after his team had departed. "Evening, Chief," she greeted, approaching the helicopter. "Still searching for answers?" Henderson straightened, wiping his hands on a shop towel. His expression was difficult to read in the shadowed hangar. "Major Sullivan didn't expect anyone else to be around at this hour. Just wanted to see her one more time," Maggie explained, running her hand along the helicopter's scarred fuselage. "We went through a lot together yesterday." Henderson watched her interaction with the aircraft, his professional reserve softening slightly. "You know, I've been maintaining helicopters for 35 years. Thought I'd seen everything until yesterday." "Find anything interesting in your analysis?" Maggie asked, genuinely curious about his technical perspective. "Too many things to list," he admitted. "Your fuel system bypass, for starters. Completely unorthodox but perfectly executed for the specific conditions you faced. And the way you redistributed electrical load through secondary circuits after the lightning strike, that shouldn't have worked, but it did." He gestured toward the engine compartment. "Most interesting is the manual throttle control you implemented after the digital systems failed. It's remarkably similar to a modification we experimented with in the early 2000s, but abandoned because pilots couldn't maintain the precise adjustments it required. Yet you made it work," he continued, a note of respect entering his voice. "Maintained optimal fuel-air mixture manually, while simultaneously handling all other flight controls in severe turbulence." Maggie smiled slightly. "I had good teachers. My father used to say that understanding the underlying principles was more important than memorizing procedures. If you know why something works, you can adapt when standard approaches fail." Henderson nodded slowly. "Your father was Daniel Sullivan." "You knew him?" Maggie asked, surprised. "Briefly, during Desert Storm. I was a young maintenance officer then." A ghost of a smile crossed Henderson's usually stern face. "He drove my commanding officer crazy with his improvements to the aircraft. But when those same modifications saved 3 pilots during a sandstorm, the complaints stopped pretty quickly." He closed the access panel he'd been examining. "I owe you an apology, Major. When you first arrived to fix the Blackhawk, I was skeptical. Thought you were just another hotshot fighter jock who didn't understand rotary aircraft." "A reasonable assumption," Maggie acknowledged without offense. "Fighter pilots aren't generally known for their helicopter expertise." "Still," Henderson insisted, "I should have evaluated you on your abilities, not my preconceptions. Won't make that mistake again." As they talked, Captain Anderson entered the hangar, looking surprised to find them there. "Major Chief," he greeted. Didn't expect a crowd at this hour." "Just saying goodbye," Maggie explained, gesturing toward the helicopter. Anderson approached, examining the aircraft with newfound appreciation. "Hard to believe we flew this back yesterday. Engineering team's calling it impossible. And yet here we are," Maggie noted. A companionable silence fell, as the 3 of them regarded the battered but resilient aircraft. Despite their different backgrounds and initial perspectives, they now shared a profound experience that had changed each of them in subtle but significant ways. "I heard about the new training program at Edwards," Anderson said finally. "General Harrison briefed me after you left. It's an exciting opportunity." "For all of us," Maggie affirmed. "Your experience will be invaluable, especially in helping traditional pilots understand these new approaches." Anderson nodded thoughtfully. "Yesterday changed my perspective on a lot of things. 20 years of flying by the book and then watching you do things that shouldn't have been possible." He shook his head. "It makes you question what other limitations might be self-imposed." "That's exactly the mindset we want to cultivate," Maggie agreed. "Not reckless disregard for established procedures, but intelligent evaluation of when and how to adapt them to unprecedented situations." As darkness fell completely outside, the 3 continued discussing the possibilities of the new program, each contributing from their unique perspective. Maggie, with her integrated approach to aircraft understanding, Anderson with his extensive operational experience, and Henderson with his deep technical knowledge. Despite their different paths, they found common ground in their dedication to advancing the art and science of flight. The next morning dawned clear and bright. The storm that had caused such havoc, now just a memory. Maggie completed her final debriefings and began preparations for the transition to her new role at Edwards. The paperwork was already moving through the system with unusual speed, a testament to General Harrison's interest in launching the program quickly. Around noon, she received a message from Colonel Mitchell requesting her presence at the base memorial garden, an unusual location for a meeting. Curious, she made her way across the base, enjoying the warmth of the desert sun after days of stormy weather. The memorial garden was peaceful, dedicated to fallen pilots and airmen who had served at Nellis. At its center stood a simple stone monument, engraved with names and dates, surrounded by desert plants that thrived in the harsh Nevada climate. Mitchell was waiting beside the monument, his uniform impeccable as always, but his manner more relaxed than usual. Beside him stood Katie, looking solemn but composed. "Thank you for coming, Maggie," Mitchell greeted her. "Katie asked to see you before departing for home." "Is everything all right?" Maggie asked, concerned by the unusual setting. Katie stepped forward, holding something in her hands, a small wooden box with intricate carving on its lid. "I wanted to give you this," she said, offering the box to Maggie. "It belonged to Mom. She always said she was saving it for when I was old enough to understand its importance. After yesterday, I think I do understand. And I think she would want you to have it." Puzzled, Maggie accepted the box, opening it carefully. Inside lay a battered compass, its brass case tarnished with age, but its mechanism still functional. Engraved on the back were the words, "Find your true north, DS." Maggie's breath caught in her throat as recognition dawned. "This was my father's," she whispered, memories flooding back. "He gave it to your mother after their first combat mission together. Said it had guided him through the worst storms, and now it could guide her too." Katie nodded. "Mom told me the story many times. She said the compass wasn't just about finding direction. It was about finding purpose, about knowing what matters most when everything around you is chaos." Maggie ran her fingers over the worn engraving, feeling a connection across time and loss. "Katie, this is a precious heirloom. It should stay in your family." "You are family," Katie said simply. "And after watching you fly that helicopter through the storm to save us, I know you understand what the compass really means better than anyone." Mitchell watched the exchange with quiet understanding, knowing how much this moment meant to both of them. The connections between Daniel Sullivan, Katie's mother Maggie, and now Katie herself formed a continuity that transcended individual loss. "There's something else," Katie continued, her voice gaining confidence. "I've been accepted to the junior aviation program that starts next fall. It's the first step toward flight school eventually." Maggie looked up in surprise. "That's a highly competitive program. When did you apply?" "Last month," Katie admitted. "Mom helped me with the application before." She paused, collecting herself. "Before the accident. The acceptance letter came yesterday while I was in the hospital. Uncle Tom brought it to me this morning." Pride and bittersweet emotion mingled in Maggie's heart. Katie was indeed following in their footsteps, continuing a legacy that had seemed in danger of ending. "Congratulations," she said warmly. "That's a significant achievement." "I was hoping," Katie added hesitantly, "that you might have time to help me prepare, even with your new assignment at Edwards. I know it's a lot to ask." "I'll make time," Maggie promised without hesitation. "Edwards isn't that far. We can schedule regular sessions, and I can provide materials for you to study between visits." Katie's face brightened with relief and excitement. "Really? That would be amazing." "On one condition," Maggie added with mock seriousness. "You maintain your academic excellence in all subjects, not just aviation-related ones. Being a good pilot requires a comprehensive education." "Deal," Katie agreed immediately. As they walked together through the memorial garden, Maggie found herself reflecting on the extraordinary chain of events that had led to this moment. What had begun as a routine repair operation had transformed into a life-changing experience for everyone involved, a demonstration of what was possible when human intuition and mechanical precision achieved perfect harmony. The damaged Black Hawk would be repaired eventually, returning to service with its extraordinary story becoming part of Air Force lore. The new training program at Edwards would develop pilots with enhanced sensitivity to their aircraft, potentially saving lives in future emergencies. and Katie would begin her journey toward becoming the next generation of the legacy that Daniel Sullivan had begun decades earlier. But beyond these tangible outcomes lay something more profound, a deeper understanding of the relationship between pilots and their machines. Not as operators and tools, but as partners in a complex dance that required both technical precision and intuitive understanding. "What are you thinking about?" Katie asked, noticing Maggie's thoughtful expression. Maggie smiled, tucking the compass carefully into her pocket. "About connections, about how some things carry forward even when people are gone." "Like flying," Katie suggested. "Like flying," Maggie agreed. "And like the things we learn from each other that can never be fully captured in manuals or procedures." They reached the garden exit, where Mitchell waited to escort Katie to her transport home. The girl impulsively hugged Maggie, who returned the embrace with genuine affection. "See you in 2 weeks for our first lesson," Katie confirmed. "I'll be there," Maggie promised. "In the meantime, start reading the introductory materials I'll send over. Flying begins on the ground, with understanding the principles." As Katie departed with Mitchell, Maggie remained for a moment, feeling the weight of the compass in her pocket and the responsibility it represented. Her father had passed his knowledge to her, just as she would now pass it to Katie and to the pilot she would train at Edwards. The circle was unbroken. Later that afternoon, Maggie found herself drawn once more to the flight line, where her FA-18 waited for a scheduled training flight. Despite the dramatic events of the past few days, routine operations continued, and she was looking forward to returning to the cockpit of her primary aircraft. The sleek lines of the Super Hornet contrasted sharply with the utilitarian design of the Black Hawk. Yet Maggie felt the same connection to both, different voices speaking the same fundamental language of flight. As she conducted her pre-flight checks, Lieutenant Parker approached, tablet in hand. "Final systems check complete, Major," she reported professionally, though excitement remained evident in her voice. "Aircraft is certified ready for flight." "Thank you, Lieutenant," Maggie replied. "Looking forward to seeing you at Edwards next month. The technical team is lucky to have you." Parker hesitated briefly before asking, "Permission to speak freely, ma'am?" "Of course. I've been reviewing all the data from the rescue mission, analyzing every aspect of your performance under those extreme conditions," Parker said earnestly. "It's revolutionary. The way you integrated technical knowledge with sensory awareness, the precise timing of your adjustments, the ability to anticipate system behaviors before they manifested." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "But there's still something I can't fully quantify, some element that transcends the data. Engineer Vasquez called it the human factor, but that seems inadequate to describe what you demonstrated." Maggie considered the observation thoughtfully. "My father had a phrase for it. He called it the conversation between pilot and aircraft. It's not mystical or supernatural, just a deeper level of communication that develops when you truly understand a machine's behaviors and characteristics." "Can it be taught?" Parker asked, returning to the question that clearly fascinated her. "The foundation can be taught," Maggie confirmed. "The technical knowledge, the sensory awareness techniques, the understanding of systems integration. But the final step, that intuitive connection, that comes from experience and personal development. Each pilot finds their own path to it." Parker nodded, seemingly satisfied with the answer. "I look forward to exploring that path at Edwards, Major." As Parker departed, Maggie completed her pre-flight preparations, her mind calm and focused despite the whirlwind of recent events. The compass in her pocket served as a tangible reminder of the legacy she carried, not just of her father, but of all those who had pushed the boundaries of what was possible in the realm of flight. The tower cleared her for takeoff, and Maggie guided the FA-18 onto the runway with practiced precision. As the powerful engines spooled up, she felt the familiar vibrations through the airframe, the subtle communications of a machine preparing to defy gravity. "Tower, this is Ghost 7, she transmitted using her call sign. "Ready for departure." "Ghost 7, you are cleared for takeoff," came the response. "Winds light and variable, ceiling unlimited. Have a good flight, Major." Maggie advanced the throttle smoothly, feeling the Super Hornet respond with eager power. The acceleration pressed her into her seat as the aircraft gathered speed, racing down the runway toward the infinite blue sky above. At precisely the right moment, she pulled back on the stick, and the fighter rose gracefully into the air, leaving the ground behind as it climbed toward the heavens. Banking slightly, Maggie turned toward the training area, the desert landscape spreading out below in breathtaking panorama. As she leveled off at altitude, Maggie felt a profound sense of rightness, of being exactly where she belonged, doing precisely what she was meant to do. The rescue mission had tested her to her limits, forcing her to draw on every skill and insight she possessed. But it had also confirmed something she had always known intuitively, that the boundaries of possibility extended far beyond what conventional wisdom suggested. Her father had understood this truth. Now she would pass it on to others, to Katie, to the pilots at Edwards, to anyone willing to listen with both mind and heart to the subtle language of flight. The FEA-18 responded perfectly to her touch, a perfect integration of pilot and machine. As Maggie guided it through a series of maneuvers, she smiled to herself, feeling the compass secure in her pocket and the future unfolding before her like the endless sky. Engineering and instinct, technology and intuition, science and soul. In the delicate balance between these seeming opposites lay the true art of flight and the continuing legacy of those who had mastered it. With the desert sun warm on her wings and the horizon stretching infinitely ahead, Major Maggie Sullivan flew onward, carrying that legacy forward into the waiting future. A note from the author. Dear readers, as I close this story, I want to share something with you. In writing about Maggie Sullivan's journey through that storm-ravaged sky, I wasn't just telling a tale of heroic aviation. I was exploring something deeper that I believe resonates with so many of us in our own lives. You see, we live in a world increasingly dominated by metrics, procedures, and standardized approaches. And while these things have their place, they keep us safe, they ensure consistency, there's a danger in relying on them too completely. Sometimes the manual doesn't have an answer. Sometimes the numbers don't capture the full picture. Sometimes you need something more. Maggie's story is about that something more. It's about the wisdom that comes from experience, the intuition that develops when you truly understand your craft, and the courage to trust yourself when conventional approaches fail. Her father taught her to listen to machines, to feel their rhythms, to understand them not just technically, but almost spiritually. In our modern world, we often dismiss such talk as unscientific or outdated. But I've known people, pilots, engineers, craftsmen, teachers, who possess this kind of deep understanding, and it's anything but outdated. It's timeless. What moved me most in writing this was exploring the relationship between generations. Daniel Sullivan passed his knowledge to Maggie, who now passes it to Katie and to her students at Edwards. This is how real wisdom survives, not through instruction manuals, but through human connection, through mentorship, through someone taking the time to show you not just how to do something, but why it matters. Many of you reading this are in that beautiful season of life where you've accumulated decades of experience. You've weathered your own storms, solved problems that had no clear answers, learned lessons that can't be found in textbooks. Like Maggie, you have something precious to pass on. Don't underestimate the value of that wisdom, even in a world that sometimes seems to worship only youth and innovation. And for those of you who've lost mentors, as Maggie lost her father, know that their influence doesn't end. That compass she carries isn't just a keepsake. It's a reminder that the principles they taught, the values they embodied, the way they approached challenges, all of that lives on in you, ready to be passed forward again. The storm that drives this story is real in more ways than one. We all face our own tempests, health crises, financial struggles, family challenges, moments when the systems we rely on fail us. In those moments, we discover what Maggie discovered, that we're capable of more than we think, that the boundaries are not where we've been told they are, that sometimes you just have to trust your instincts and push through. I wrote this for you because I believe you understand these truths already. You've lived them. And I hope that in Maggie's journey, you see reflections of your own courage, your own persistence, your own refusal to accept that something can't be done just because the manual says it's impossible. Thank you for spending time with this story. Thank you for understanding that the most important lessons in life often come not from textbooks, but from the experiences we share and the wisdom we pass along. Keep finding your true north with deep respect and admiration. Your storyteller.